organizations have equal access to government funding and the equal right to exercise their deeply held beliefs. We take this step because we know that in solving the many, many problems and our great challenges, faith is more powerful than government, and nothing is more powerful than God.
Arizona's governor has signed a bill that gives teachers a big raise, and that ends a week-long statewide teacher walkout. Jeff Manasso has the latest.
Arizona lawmakers pulled an all-nighter to pass part of a budget plan now signed into law that gives big raises to many of the state's striking teachers and support staff who walked off the job last Thursday, shutting down classes to over 1 million students.
And this is going to be the bill among the other bills of the budget that's going to codify the 20% teacher pay raise by 2020.
It also includes increased education funding, and though all teacher demands were not met, many Arizona schools now say they'll reopen their doors tomorrow. Jeff Manasso, Fox News.
We're seeing new levels of censorship on social media and renewed attacks on families and communities. And Chris Woodward reports Christian adoption is no exception.
Jamison Taylor of the Mississippi Center for Public Policy says the left is trying to prevent Christian adoptions in two ways.
First, you're seeing states like Illinois and Massachusetts are discriminating against faith-based adoption agencies, literally putting them out of business. Second, you have holdovers from the Obama administration at the Department of State are working to shut down international adoption. They see international adoption as a form of neo-colonial racism. And these bureaucrats are reducing the number of accredited adoption agencies. They're putting pressure on small Christian providers, and they're making it very difficult and very expensive for families to adopt internationally. So we saw in 2017 there were only 5,000 international adoptions by U.S. parents. And this is at a time when the number of orphan children worldwide is increasing.
It is for these and other reasons that Taylor thinks Christians have to defend their civil liberties.
Call your lawmakers. Ask them to protect religious adoption agencies from discrimination. Call the White House. Encourage President Trump and his newly appointed Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, to save international adoption and to appoint new leadership at the Office of Children's Services in the State Department.
I'm Chris Woodward.
There was no campaign finance violation. That's what one of President Trump's lawyers, Rudy Giuliani, tells Fox News about the repayment the president made through a legal firm to personal attorney Michael Cohen for paying Stormy Daniels. John Decker reports.
Michael Avenatti, the lawyer for Stormy Daniels, reacting on Twitter to Giuliani's disclosure, writing, "Whatever happens, Fox and friends, please do not stop helping our case week in and week out by having Mr. Trump and Mr. Giuliani appear and make damaging statements. You are truly the best. Where can we send the gift basket?" White House spokeswoman Sarah Sanders told Fox News the president is pleased with Giuliani's interview with Sean Hannity. The president also tweeting, "Money from the campaign or campaign contributions played no role in this transaction." At the White House, John Decker, Fox News.
The key long-term U.S. mortgage rate declined slightly this week after a steady rise for most of April. The average rate on the 30-year fixed-rate mortgage slipped to 4.55% this week. American Family News is online at onenewsnow.com. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Hi, my name is Reggie Rogers, the host of Power Jam's Wake Up Show. What, y'all?
Don't leave us out, Brother Rogers.
I'm saying. Mother, I wasn't going to do that, but along with me, join the Break Fast Club.
Hey, y'all.
Holla! Ready on the left, Brother Rogers. Amen, Jose. Join us each and every Saturday at 8 o'clock a.m. and again at 8 o'clock p.m. right here on Urban Family Talk.
Power Jams.
The Wake Up Show.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
Republicans use Pelosi as a cudgel in their ads to convince people not to vote for Democrats, and they're not wrong. We might like Nancy Pelosi in the Bay Area, but America doesn't. things that are more popular than Nancy Pelosi, according to an NBC Wall Street Journal poll, include the NRA, current Speaker Paul Ryan, even Donald Trump. Among all Americans, Donald Trump is far more liked than Nancy Pelosi.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right here on Urban Family Talk and American Family Radio. Check out more at stacyontheright.com. You can get all kinds of fun information there, news and information, and really hit the subscribe button. That's what we want you to do. Right now, I talk to you about what's going to be on the program. We normally don't have that intro going in, so please forgive. We're having a great program today. We have a good guest for you. And we're also going to be talking about all of the news of the day, all the best stuff. Today we have Dr. Jerome Siegel, Senate candidate, Democrat from Maryland, and he's going to come on and talk about the United States needing to pull out of the nuclear deal, but from the perspective of someone he's on the left. He's a Democrat, so he's going to be talking to us about that. We're also, you just heard coming in, San Francisco anchor who said that President Trump is actually far more liked than Nancy Pelosi. And the NRA is more liked than Nancy Pelosi. Now, this is a concerted effort on the part of the Democrats to kind of purge their ranks of their new reputation, which is that of a party of elderly individuals. And you guys know, I'm in the thick of it with whoever has the best ideas, whoever has the best policies. And so the fact that leadership can be elderly is, to me, not the determining factor. But the Democrats have a chokehold on the younger voters. And so it's a lot of complaining coming from newer legislators who are saying these candidates are older. These leadership, they're older. They don't represent the new Democratic paradigm. So that they're now beginning to talk about that openly. And that is kind of the opening salvos in a bit of a war where they're going to try to institute some new leadership. And Nancy Pelosi's not going to go without a fight. She's actually been out there kind of fighting back, stroke for stroke. Every time you have someone say something like what that anchor just said, you'll have Nancy Pelosi somewhere else saying that she fully intends to remain the speaker. And she plans to help take over the House of Representatives again. And so it's an interesting dynamic that they have going on. Now I want to pivot over to what I thought was stunning admission by Hillary Clinton that she too is being left in the dirt, left behind in the dust by the Democrats. She talks about being a capitalist, which we all know she is. She's not worth $250 million for nothing. She's actually saying so many Democrats are socialists now. This is something she helped bring about. So it's biting her back, and that's interesting. But I want to listen to her talk about, she's at yet another forum, sitting on the stage talking. It's number one.
You may be the only presidential candidate since World War II that actually had to stand up and say, I am a capitalist. And you did. Did it hurt you?
Probably. I mean, you know, it's hard. It's hard to know. But I mean, if you're in the Iowa caucuses and 41% of Democrats are socialists or self-described socialists, and I'm asked, are you a capitalist? And I say yes, but with appropriate regulation and appropriate accountability. You know, that probably gets lost in the, oh my gosh, she's a capitalist.
Really? So she had to say she's a capitalist, but with certain parameters on there. Now, what is the key here? What does this really mean? Well, she's again still on the great What Happened tour, still trying to figure out why she didn't win, still trying to find reasons and people that she can blame for her own ineptitude during the campaign. But this is important because it points to the direction of the Democrats. And so when people are saying things like the Democrats are socialists, socialism is on the path to communism, Democrats don't believe in the American way anymore, it's not that big of a stretch. When that questioner asks her, you know, or makes a statement, you're probably the first candidate who's ever had to make that statement since World War II. It's because socialism was appropriately panned for all of the decades preceding, you know, these last couple. Because before our Democrats started moving towards socialism, everybody had a place of agreement that they operated from, which was socialism is bad. Socialism reaps negative consequences for those who are forced to participate in it. And there's nothing so stark as listening to or reading about those who constructed the wall between Germany and the two parts of Germany. So remember, the wall separated it basically cut Germany in half. So the other part, East Germany, was a part of the Soviet Union, and they were practicing communism, socialism, and then communism. And then you have West Germany, capitalism, freedom, an ally of the rest of the West, and especially the United States. So you saw Germany, West Germany, explode with innovation and development and just lots of prosperity. They were prosperous before the war. They were prosperous after the war. It took them time to bounce back, but it was ingenuity and hardworking, that German kind of work ethic. It was there. In East Germany, before the wall, people were seeing how different things were in West Germany. People were seeing how fantastic it was and how there were so many opportunities. And so little by little, they just would move over. They would just leave. They would go onto the other side, and they were German, so there was no problem. And they would go and they'd start working. They were even finding that if they owned a business and they lived in East Germany, the majority of their customers were coming from the West. And so they would move to where their customers were. Well, as this began, the leadership in East Germany said, we can't, too many people are leaving. People are making it look as if socialism doesn't work. Now, this is so hard to believe, but it is actually what happened when they were beginning to formulate the wall, the idea that they were going to wall the people in. It was to keep people in. It wasn't to keep Western ideas out or people out. It was to keep the people who lived there from leaving and making them look bad. So they said they constructed the wall in such a way because they wanted to make sure. One of the wall engineers, this is a part of the historical record, he said, we have to make them stay so they can see how good socialism is. They're just not giving it a chance. If they would only stay and try it, they'd see how good it is. That's not what happened. They stayed. They tried it because they were forced to. People were killed trying to get to West Germany, trying to escape the socialism. And in the end, when it collapsed, now you have, and I'm going off of numbers from when we were last in Germany back in 2006, where they were spending $20 billion a year back in 2006, subsidizing East Germany because the wall was down, and every year the subsidies have to go up because they're trying to bring East Germany up to par with West Germany after the fall of communism, which happened many years before that. Remember, it wasn't in 2006 that the wall came down. It was much, much, earlier than that. So everywhere you look where there's full-blown socialism without an element of capitalism at all, there's failure. Now, what the Democrats want here in the United States is a reduction in the amount of freedom. They don't like Stacey Washington being able to talk on the radio about how socialism doesn't work. We know it doesn't work, but in order for them to teach people that it does work, they have to eliminate people saying that it doesn't. They have to eliminate the proof that it doesn't work. They point to countries like Canada, but Canada is not truly socialist in that all of the entire means of production is not owned by the government. There's enough capitalism there to make it work. Now, they have an entirely socialistic safety net, and some people will say that the United States does as well, but we don't. We don't have that because if you want to eliminate programs, and it seems as if it's getting to a place where it's impossible, but it is still possible, you can do that by simply electing people who get rid of it. It's not in our Constitution that we have to have safety net programs, welfare, what people call an entitlement, but we know everyone pays into, the Social Security. These are not constitutionally mandated programs. So, in the end, we're always going to have people who are going to say, we should do the socialism. We should give it a try. We need to give socialism an opportunity to work. People are always going to say that, but we need only look at history to know that they're wrong and that their ideas are based on a failed system or systems that aren't truly socialist. And the one example we have of full-blown socialism operating right now and failing out at an epic rate is that of Venezuela, where they're now not just eating their pets, but stealing animals from the zoo. And they've lost hundreds of thousands of people that no longer live in Venezuela because they're starving to death. They're starving. They've all lost weight. It's a terrible situation. And if Venezuela were a capitalist country and this was going on, it'd be on the news 24/7. CNN would not be able to cover it enough. MSNBC would never have, they'd never get tired of showing pictures of it. But because Bernie Sanders is their cause du jour, he's their standard bearer, and because socialism is exactly what Venezuela is doing, of course they're not going to cover it. They're not covering it. So it's to me, it's one of the most fascinating things to see Hillary Clinton make this admission. It's on par with what we saw from James Comey, where he was talking about he believes that Hillary Clinton would have kept him on. We don't know what she would have done. That's absolute whataboutism or what ifism. But the fact that James Comey is out saying the things that he's saying, and Hillary Clinton is still out saying the things that she's saying, they're like boomerangs because they just keep coming back. And they're also in a position where it's actually beneficial to us. The more they say, the more we understand what kind of a bullet we dodged by electing Donald Trump. And for those who, I had a big tweet stream this morning talking about some things that I'd heard on The View this week. So I don't actually watch the show live. I usually catch, they have the whole show online, and sometimes I'll catch a portion of it. And usually it's where Meghan McCain is smacking them down for something. And so I was tweeting about it this morning because Whoopi Goldberg said on the show yesterday that Meghan McCain is wrong for characterizing the panelists on The View, the regular hosts, as being against people who voted for Donald Trump. Now, I don't know how Whoopi Goldberg can say that when every day on that show they vilify the president and, by proxy, his voters. They say things about him that he's a racist, that he's a white supremacist, based on his comments after Charlottesville, that, first of all, they're demonstrably false. And second of all, if he's a racist and they know it, it means that we knew it and we voted for him and he's a racist. So therefore, we are all racist. That is absolutely ridiculous. I tweeted about it because they need to be called on the carpet about it. Whoopi Goldberg needs to stop acting as if people can't draw their conclusions based upon what she said. And it's not just her, Joy Behar, who it is a travesty that she remains on that panel because of what she said about Christians and Christianity being a mental illness. Even with her apology, the statement and how long she allowed it to stand impugns her ability to sit on that panel as a regular, everyday American making statements that you don't have to agree with her, but she doesn't have the right to insult half of this country, more than half of this country. We're still a majority Christian nation. So I look at that and I just feel like I had to let it go. So that's why I was tweeting about it this morning. And so that brings me over to, obviously The View. A lot of people always message me back when I post things about it. They'll send me a note and say, are you still watching that? Nobody watches that. Plenty of people still watch The View. They usually are on the left-hand side of the political spectrum, but people still watch it. And for the sake of Meghan McCain, who has really, she's doing a great job on there now, coming with a lot of facts and statistical information. It's still worth it to see what they're saying because they are speaking to a good size audience. So now I want to pivot over to, there's a news story out. And again, this is the reason why we have problems, because we throw good money after bad. And one part of that is the biggest foreign aid recipient. So, we give a lot of foreign aid to countries around the globe. And we've gone over it on the show, what those countries are, how much money they get. I keep the list at the ready, the most recent list that I was able to find of how much we give to each country. But this story is out over at cnsnews.com. And this is pretty amazing because it just goes to show you that we used to get something out of that money and we're getting less and less out of it on a regular basis. The biggest foreign aid recipients voted with the U.S. at the United Nations only 26.5% of the time. Now, Nikki Haley made a statement about how if we don't start getting more bang for our buck, we're going to stop giving the bucks. And she's right to say that. If you're going to be receiving U.S. aid to the tune of millions in some of these countries, lots of them, billions of dollars a year, when we have a vote at the UN and we need you, you should be stepping up and voting with us. If you're not, you must not want that money. You don't like the way that sounds? Well, neither do I. I don't think we should give them the money at all. But if we're going to give it to them, we should get something back for it. All right, when we get back, we'll have more for you here on Stacey on the Right. Stay there.
preborn is saving babies' lives.
My name is Omaris, and I was 19 when I found out I was pregnant. I felt that if I brought a child to this planet, that I could not take care of it, and I could not be mentally prepared to handle everything that comes with having a child. So I thought my best option was to have an abortion. And once I came to have my ultrasound and I heard his heartbeat, I could not have an abortion.
The Ministry of Preborn saves babies' lives through ultrasounds. When a mother hears her baby's heartbeat on an ultrasound, she'll choose life 80% of the time. To donate and provide for a free ultrasound to help save a baby's life, go to preborn.com or dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. That's pound 250 and say baby. All gifts are tax deductible. Your love can save a life.
Hi, I'm Crawford Loritz with a legacy moment. I suppose just about every family has endured some sibling rivalry, and our family is no exception. I remember when our kids were younger, there was sort of a jockeying for parity. They seemed to be looking over their shoulders, constantly wondering who was getting attention or who was getting more or where they were in relationship to everybody else. Boy, are we glad they grew out of this. But some of us never grow out of our tendency to compare or evaluate where we are based upon where others are. In fact, occasionally I have to fight that in myself. Our world is laden with competition. We want to get ahead, and we're constantly looking over our shoulders and comparing ourselves with others. On top of that, sometimes it appears that the ungodly are doing better than the followers of Christ. We need to pay attention to these words from Psalm 37. Here's verse 7. Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for him. Do not fret because of him who prospers in his way, because of the man who carries out wicked schemes. Then verses 12 and 13. The wicked plots against the righteous and gnashes him with his teeth. The Lord laughs at him, for he sees his day is coming. Let me make 3 quick comments. First of all, we need to wait on God to give us what he has for us. We need to put to rest this comparison game. The second observation is to stop obsessing about what others have. The Lord is our portion. Rest in him. Relax. Then the third observation is this. God will take care of the wicked. Here's what I want you to remember today. Let's mind our own spiritual business. Rejoice in who we are and what we have in him. And let him take care of those other folks.
More information about the ministry of Crawford Loritz can be found online at livingalegacy.org.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
Well, I think that many career people at the Justice Department must really find this quite repulsive. The very notion of a former FBI director writing a tell-all book is a virtual contradiction in terms. You know, FBI directors have valued their circumspection. You know, they need to have presidents trust them. And Comey has really destroyed that. And it's not just the book. It's not just the tenor, but the timing. You know, the fact that he rushed this book out is inexcusable. He was the head of this investigation and is now one of the cooperating witnesses. Nobody would suggest that this book is benefiting the investigation. To the contrary, he's undermining his role as a witness. And so the question is, why is he doing it? And the answer is rather obvious. He's going to make a lot of money, but in the process, he's going to do untold harm to the institution he once headed.
Yeah, he is. In fact, he already has. The trust in government institutions is at an all-time low, and we're going to see even more of the erosion of that trust because of it's almost a crazy pants type of a catch-22, like a circle of doom where the more he talks, the more people don't trust the FBI, and the harder it is for FBI agents who are honest, honorable public servants to do their jobs. And so what choice do we have other than to kind of look at what he's doing, listen to what he's saying? He's everywhere. He's not going away. And then kind of try to move on from there. So I want to complete out. There's just a little bit more information here on this. Biggest foreign aid recipients voting with the UN 26% of the time. And Welcome back to the program. We are live across the country in 20 states, and we're having a fantastic time here on the show. And it's really great to be with you today. So we've got this story over at cnsnews.com. And if you're just joining, welcome to the show. UrbanFamilyTalk.com is where you can find out more and also find the podcast. 26% of the time, 26.5%, we've got these UN nations who receive huge amounts of foreign aid from us voting with us. Now, if you take Israel out of the calculation, and this is for the fiscal year of 2017 that they did the calculation. If you take Israel out, it actually drops to USAID beneficiaries' average voting coincidence with us at the UN. It becomes 20.9%. Now, this data is from the State Department's annual report to Congress on voting practices from the United Nations. The recently released report for 2017 actually uses a different methodology this year in a bid, the department says, to get a more accurate assessment of the extent to which other countries align themselves with U.S. interests. And so the new report finds that all 93 of the resolutions brought to a final vote in the U.S. General Assembly, in those 93, or of all of those 93 resolutions, all other countries' votes coincided with those of the U.S., where they voted either yes with us or no with us or abstained with us, an average of 31% of the time. So if we just did a simple slash, that means we could get rid of 69% of our USAID budget. Now, the first thing people say when you start talking about eliminating the USAID budget is, well, if you eliminate the USAID, then we won't have any control over what the other countries do. We don't have any control over what they do now. If we did, they'd be voting with us at the UN. The other thing people always say, especially those on the left, will say, well, the thing is, that's just a pittance in the budget. Why do anything? And that's what we've been operating off for the past 40 years or so. What people do is they'll say the biggest spending we have is on entitlements, and that's where we should be doing the cuts, knowing good and well no cuts can be made to entitlements because no one's going to put up with that, including the people who are speaking to you. Then they'll say it's just a pittance, as if we don't all know the concept in budgeting of the snowball effect, which is where you take all of your bills and you list them in descending order. So the big bills are at the top and the small bills are at the bottom. And you don't pay attention to how long the bills are for. You just list them in order of smallest to largest. The smallest is at the bottom. Then what you do is you take whatever amount you're paying on that first bill at the bottom, and you cut your budget in other areas, and you find whatever amount you can add to it. So if it's a bill that's $35 a month, and you're paying the minimum, $35 a month, and you find by cutting out drinking coffee, instead of drinking out coffee 4 or 5 times a week and eating lunch out 3 or 4 times a week and having, Sunday brunch every week, you cut all of that back. So you're still doing it, but you're doing it at much lower frequencies. Then you take the additional savings from all of that, these are discretionary funds that you're redirecting, and you put it towards that $35 a month. So instead of paying it off in 7 years, you pay it off in, let's say, 11 months. Then you take that, let's say 135 instead of 35 that you were paying. And instead of paying the next bill up, which might be 55 a month, instead of continuing to pay 55 a month, you take the 35 plus the additional savings and you keep on going out less and you roll all of that in. So you take the 155 and the 130, the 55 and the 135, you add those together and then you pay that. And this is called the debt snowball. As you move up the list, the bigger bills, you might have a bill that's $500 a month, but when you get to it, you'll be paying the $500 a month you were paying all along, plus the total of all of the other bills below that you've now eliminated. So when you get your stack of mail at home and you're up the list, you're 2 years into this debt snowball, not only have you paid off 5 or 6 different things, so you have 5 or 6 less envelopes per month that are bills that you have to open up and actually cut a check for, but now you're on the road to paying off that $500 a month bill, which may be money that you've borrowed for 7 years or 10 years. You're on track to pay that off in maybe 2 years. And along the way, which is what usually happens, is God blesses that activity. When you start saying, you know what, I'm going to start paying down this debt. People who owe tons of money to different places, it's like being a slave. The debtor is the slave to the lender. That's biblical. And what happens is God blesses that. And before you know it, you're on Dave Ramsey, which that's where this concept comes from, if you're wondering, Dave Ramsey. all of a sudden you're on Dave Ramsey burning your last bill or burning your mortgage or, burning your student loan payment. This is how that gets done. If that works for your budget, your yearly budget as an individual, does that not work for government? Or is the money that we spend on the government so different than the money that we spend in our individual households? Yes, I understand that the government is much more complex and we're talking trillions of dollars a year. But the concept is still the same. So if we're not talking about paying anything down, but we are talking about cutting spending so that we can have savings, then it matters. Ask anybody who grew up in the Depression or anybody who used to, people who are in their 70s and 80s and ask them, does it matter if I blow, small amounts of cash here and there? And they'll tell you right away, money stacks up. Pennies stack up. If you stack enough pennies up, you'll have $1. You stack enough dollars up, you have $100, et cetera, et cetera. So the idea that we shouldn't worry about the federal U.S. aid budget to these nations because the amounts are so small in comparison to our other spending, that's not logical. It doesn't make sense. It is a demonstration of a lack of common sense. And it is proven in the fact that because we won't cut these smaller amounts, because people say, $558 million to Planned Parenthood, that's not really a big deal. They paid their head, the head of Planned Parenthood Federation of America was paid over $1 million a year before she just resigned. $1 million a year to organize and oversee the systematic destruction of unborn babies. We subsidize that. We're still subsidizing that. Come on, people. I need common sense folks to put the brakes. You pump the brakes and you say, wow, this does not make sense. And that is what we're seeing here. So, it's wrong. It's wrong. And with this USAID budget and there are 192 other UN member states, Israel tops the list of the other member states. They have a 94% voting coincidence with the U.S., which is good. That's a good report. The other 12 big aid recipients' voting coincidences range from a low of 18% for South Africa. Why are we still giving them money? To a high of 24% for Pakistan. Why do we give Pakistan money? Why should they get even a penny from us? They're only voting with us 24% of the time. 24%. So every time they take a vote that's against us, it should be an opportunity for us to come to them and say, look, we noticed you didn't vote with us again. We noticed you didn't do your duty again. So next year, your USAID, just reduce it by the percentage that they vote with us or the percentage that they don't vote with us. You vote with us 24% of the time, 76% reduction in your USAID budget for next year. Some of these nations wouldn't even care. Some of them would be desperate to keep that money, and they would decide to vote with us. And why is that so important? Because we're losing control of an organization that we are the primary contributor to. We give the most money. Out of all of the member nation states, we give the most. Now, well, America's rich. America, we should give more because we colonialized this and we took that and we're doing this and we're doing that. Okay. But we should still get our bang for our buck for the USAID dollars. So that's that. Now I want to pivot over to these leaked chats of the BBC women staffers clashing over the transgender issue. So I had to laugh at this when I read it. So, there's been a little bit of a split in the rabid feminist movement. And some feminists are of the mindset that, look, a trans woman has the same rights as a regular woman, like a biological woman. We need them. They're a part of our coalition. We should add them in. We should stick with them. Other women who are feminists, they call themselves feminists and they're activists, they do not believe that. And this split, the schism within this movement is perfectly demonstrated in this leaked chat messages. So you've heard of the BBC, British Broadcasting Corporation. Now they have a online chat message stream that's called the BBC Sisterhood. It's on WhatsApp. And what they do is they get on there and they chat about things they're doing for the movement, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the leaked chat messages show a bitter behind-the-scenes fight among these BBC staffers on the subject of transgender inclusion. So the younger women think that trans men should be included. The older women are like, pump the brakes. No, they should not. They are not women. That they may become women by having sex changes and become actual women. But until they've done that, just declaring that you're a woman isn't enough for them. So here's why. They are on there having this discussion, and they start having a kind of a chat about whether or not trans women who are biologically male should count as women towards the equal pay and representation figures. So imagine this. Imagine, and I'm not, this is not what we know definitively has happened, but just work with me here. If you're a man working for an organization and you see women working for equal pay and they want to be paid more, and that pay imbalance being satisfied will throw the budget out of whack. If, let's say 100 women employees all get raises of 20 or 30% to become on parity with men, then you would say, okay, this is not something that's budget friendly for us. Well, you could take advantage of the fact that all you have to do in order to be considered a woman is to say, I'm a woman. I believe I'm a woman today. And then all of a sudden, if you had 5 or 6 men do that, your numbers would balance out. And so that's what the older women on the chat are saying. This could actually work against us. If we accept these biological men, they could easily declare themselves women and then later go back to being men because they've changed nothing. They don't have anything on the line. So one of the women she's a BBC producer, she wrote in the chat, she said, the reason we don't get on programs and panels is discrimination due to biology, and that's the thing that needs to be addressed. Now, I'm not making a declaration of accepting what they've said or denying it. I'm just talking about I'm just sharing with you what they've said. So another woman messaged back, agreed, a panel with 2 men and 2 men who identify as women is not 50-50. But a younger female staffer messaged in after them and took umbrage. She said, hello, I find this quote offensive. Trans women are women and should be included in these discussions, ? And then another producer, who's a senior producer, wrote in, if trans women self-ID are eligible for maternity pay or leave, it means the sex discrimination claim of being fired or badly treated for pregnancy is erased. In other words, a biological man who cannot get pregnant, who says he's on maternity leave because he's adopted a baby, now you can't say there's any discrimination because now men are getting the benefit. She says one loses that resource to a claim for sex discrimination, though, of course, the discrimination would still happen. Should trans women qualify for maternity leave, though? Replied a younger employee. The tension between the so-called trans exclusionary radical feminists, TERFs, and trans accepting feminists has boiled over in the United Kingdom in recent days after more than 300 women quit the left-leaning Labour Party over the decision to count trans women in all women candidate shortlists. So in the Labour Party, they're trying to bring in more women to run for political office. But trans women, biological males who identify as females, are skewing those numbers by running, therefore disenfranchising biological women and messing with the recruitment numbers. One of the local Labor Council women told BBC Radio, why should we be the ones to give up our space? A trans-identified man saying, I'm a woman, therefore I have a right to be on this list. That's what I'm objecting to, nothing else. So it's like a bunch of crazy cats fighting over a scrap of salmon. That's what we've come to. This is in Great Britain, but the same conversations are going on here. Crazy pants. All right, when we get back, we'll have more for you. Stay there. It's Stacey on the Right.
This is Uncommon Moments with Super Bowl winning coach Tony Dungy and his wife Lauren on their uncommon marriage adventure. Available now in paperback.
You need to set aside some time to talk. If you don't commit to talking together and making time for the heart-to-heart communication, it's not going to happen. I can tell you that. And I'm talking about setting aside time to talk on a regular basis. And this isn't the time to change things radically in your life or with your husband, but you really need to share your heart with your spouse and share your highs and lows and just have some good dialogue, good conversation without the kids being around.
The Uncommon Marriage Adventure by Tony and Lauren Dungy. Now available in softcover from Tyndale Momentum. More info at CoachDungy.com. That's CoachDungy.com.
We need you to call your senators today. Tell them to put an end to the liberals' filibuster, switch to a majority vote, and defund Planned Parenthood. Your call will make a difference. Call the Capitol switchboard at 202-224-3121 or go to afaaction.net. Again, call 202-224-3121 and tell your senators to switch to a majority vote and defund Planned Parenthood.
Just as David's mighty man Benaiah chased down a lion into a pit on a snowy day, Lion Chasers champions uncommon men and women of faith who are unafraid to stand up and speak truth to power in these dark and evil days. Never before has there been such a need for people of faith to draw a line in the sand with the sword of truth. Lion Chasers, the intersection of faith and public policy with Lonnie Poindexter. Weekday mornings at 10 Central on Urban Family Talk.
And my father, your great-grandfather, fought in World War II.
Really?
He was a gunner on the big ship out in the Pacific Ocean.
Wow.
Your great-grandmother did her part, too.
Was she on a ship?
Oh, no. She stayed back home. She and a lot of her friends worked really hard in a factory because the men had gone off to war.
Ooh.
And they held scrap metal drives to help in the war effort. The folks back home were heroes, too.
Here at the American Family Association, we consider you the heroes back home. As you fulfill your responsibility of caring for your family day to day, your partnership with us is crucial as we fight the enemies of freedom in America. Thank you for your commitment to the American Family Association.
Grandpa, what's a scrap metal drive?
Let's get some cookies, and I'll tell you all about it.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right.
We are but 15 months into this administration, and we've already made outstanding progress by speaking the truth about the challenges we face, by confronting them head on, by partnering with strong, sovereign, independent nations to make America and the world more prosperous and secure. We've put a hurt on the ISIS caliphate in Iraq and Syria. We've done so by a great diplomatic work. We're confronting all types of Iranian hostility and are deciding on the next steps for the flawed JCPOA. We've imposed real consequences on Russia for its acts of aggression. And we will soon move our embassy in Israel to Jerusalem, years ahead of schedule.
Wow. Fantastic. So years ahead of schedule. That's got to be something that the leaders in Israel and the people of Israel are so excited about. We already have land there. We've talked about the 7-acre plot that we've owned and leased from the nation state of Israel for about $1 a year, I think it is, that is supposed to be the site of the new embassy. And of course, there have been numerous plans drawn up and different opportunities to, take advantage of that piece of land. But as of right now, we've built nothing on it. It's just a vacant lot. And so it sounds to me like they're moving the ball pretty quickly. And with a president who one of his primary exploits over the course of his career has been building projects, this is going to be interesting to see what they come up with. And so I'm pretty excited about that. And obviously it takes time to build something like this, but to have Mike Pompeo mention it as he's coming in to assume his new role, that's good stuff. It's really good stuff. So we've got that audio from Mike Pompeo talking about moving it in ahead of schedule. And speaking of different things that work, I teased a little bit in the first segment that walls work. And I know there's a lot of discussion here. Obviously, we've got the latest omnibus bill does not fund the border wall, not construction of new wall, only maintenance of old wall that exists. And all of the old wall is obsolete. And it's now obvious that these things work anyway. It's obvious. And when I say it's obvious, we need only look at countries that have put up walls recently, because Democrats want you to think no one's ever put a wall up, or the walls that have been put up were put up long ago. That's what they want you to think. That's not true. We need only look at Hungary over in the Eastern European area. So a far-right mayor there is hailing the success of a new border fence, saying that it has protected Hungary from the woes of mass immigration. His name is Laszlo Torozaki. He says, "It saved my town." His community is on the border with Serbia and was at the center of a wave of migrants in 2015 who were coming through to seek better lives in the West. He says calmness has returned since then because of the wall. He was one of the loudest voices in a campaign that convinced Hungary's government to build 2 parallel 10-foot-high razor wire electric fences at the border, which also doubles as the frontier for the European Union. The result is a modern-day Iron Curtain that stretches for 100 miles. It's monitored by soldiers, dogs, thermal cameras, and newly recruited police officers. Hungarian authorities say it has effectively shut off the main migrant route. So I want to pull now a piece of audio from our next segment. It's number 4, McConnell. He's talking about confirming judicial picks for the Senate. Let's listen to number 4.
Now I want to switch to judges. It's my pet issue, and you've been spectacular on this. Do you expect a retirement from the court this summer, Mr. Leader?
I really don't know, but I'm grateful that you've had an interest in this, because I think you've told your listeners from time to time, this is my top priority in the Senate. Of course, I love the tax bill. I think the tax bill will make an important difference for the country, but when the winds, the political winds shift, we never leave taxes alone. When we did comprehensive tax reform 30 years ago, it lasted 4 years. What I want to do is make a lasting contribution to the country, and by appointing and confirming these strict constructionists to the courts who are in their late 40s or early 50s, I believe, working in conjunction with the administration, we're making a generational change in our country that will be repeated over and over and over down through the years.
Wow. So he gets all the credit here for the action that he took during the final year of President Obama's administration. And it wasn't unprecedented. I know that was something that was discussed a lot. He did this. It was unprecedented. It wasn't. It's been done before, but he utilized, Senate maneuvers and procedural actions to keep the seat open so that they could appoint Neil Gorsuch. And so that's at the Supreme Court level, but at the different federal levels, there are so many different openings and vacancies that are coming about that will need to be filled. And just like President Obama has had a lasting change on the face of the court and the actions that have been taken, and we can see that in the continual pushback through the judiciary against President Trump's immigration reforms that he's tried to implement, and the refugee reforms, and any kind of control that he's tried to exert over who can come here and live and how they can arrive here and in what numbers. The judiciary has been instrumental in pushing back on that. That is a direct result of the appointments made by President Obama. A corresponding number, actually a larger number of availabilities are on the horizon. They're appearing now. There actually are plenty of vacancies right now. And the slow activity at the Senate level is a reflection of the Democrats trying to stop Donald Trump from fulfilling his duty as the president and filling those vacancies. So I'm interested in seeing who's going to go on, what kind of impacts they're going to have, but it's a slow process. And while the Democrats can slow it down, they can't prevent President Trump from doing these things unless they're able to take back the House and impeach the president. If they're able to implement impeachment proceedings, then that will completely derail the work that the Trump administration is so keen on getting done, namely fulfilling these appointments. And that is one way that they can kind of put a stop to it. They can slow it down to almost, nothing. And right now they've got it slowed down considerably. So that it's great to hear Mitch McConnell kind of explaining and I've not always been his biggest fan. So he gets some credit here. Glad to see him, doing something that we can actually say, yes, that was great. That was really good for him to do. So now I want to pivot over to, we've got Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who's finally come out and made a statement publicly. She'd said a few things on Facebook, but she's now come out and finally made a statement about the way she was treated at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. And it's interesting because I got to say, just from my own visceral reaction, I would want to strike back. I mean, who wouldn't? She was attacked in a public place for a lot of things that are out of her control. She can't control what President Trump tweets or what he says. She can't go back in time and erase things that the president has tweeted or said that have angered people who are on the left side of the aisle. She should not be the recipient of the vitriol that they really want to deliver to President Trump. And he just refuses to go to their dinners and their little get-togethers because he knows they're going to take the opportunity to make him look bad and to attack him publicly. So you have White House Press Secretary Sanders coming out on Fox and Friends today, and she responded to criticism from comedian Michelle Wolf by wishing Michelle Wolf a happy life. The quote from her is, "Look, I think that evening says a whole lot more about her than it does about me. The people that were my friends before that evening are my friends today, and I'm going to continue doing the job that I came here to do every single day. I'm very proud of the fact that I work in this administration for this president, and we're going to keep pushing forward and doing everything we can to make America better." Then she went on to highlight the successes of the Trump administration. She said she hopes Wolf is able to find the same happiness the White House staff has in serving President Donald Trump. Here's the quote. She says, "I think we've had a great first year and a half at doing that. A huge success story that we're proud of. I hope that she, Michelle Wolf, can find some of the same happiness that we all have, because I think she may need a little bit more of that in her life, because the rest of us here are doing great." Boy, that takes a lot for her to say that instead of attacking Michelle Wolf for her looks or for her statements or for her poor performance or for any of the things that readily pop to mind about Michelle Wolf. It's almost unbelievable that Sarah Huckabee Sanders was able to make that statement instead of some things that possibly she could have said. So now I want to move over to today's the National Day of Prayer. And one of the exciting things about the National Day of Prayer is that it's a moment where everyone in this country, whether you're a person of faith or not, you can simply pause and acknowledge that we've been so richly blessed and we have such a great opportunity here in this country to do things that we want to do. And so trending on Twitter is National Day of Prayer, their own hashtag. And some people are using it to commemorate the lives of soldiers who've fallen in the line of duty. The president spoke today and celebrated the National Day of Prayer at the White House. He issued a proclamation at the Rose Garden, and he's signing an executive order today. And I have the text of it. I'm not going to read it to you, but it basically changes the name of the previous faith-based initiative. It was an office that operated underneath the purview of the president. And now they're renaming that initiative and continuing the White House tradition that President Truman proclaimed when he started the National Day of Prayer. And it's exciting. It's exciting to have the president acknowledge that and for him to be openly, looking into that. And I've seen some comments of late of people saying, President Trump's not a real Christian. Look at the way he's lived, et cetera, et cetera. That really demonstrates kind of a limited knowledge of what kind of people God can use and what the people of the Bible were like. What's interesting about the people of the Bible, of that age and that era, is that they were just as flawed as we are. They made just as many mistakes as we do. And if you're someone, well, I've never had an extramarital affair, I've only been married once, and you're living a life as a paragon of virtue, congratulations. But you know that God counts lying, gossiping, even having a haughty spirit, all the same as murder and, all of the other, they're all sins to God. It's all unholy to God. And so I hear some people kind of lifting themselves up and they're like, well, I'm not perfect, but I'm not like that Donald Trump. That's not a spirit that God honors. And it was the same with President Obama. We held serious philosophical differences on a visceral level, especially on the issue of pro-life. But there were things I could compliment him about. And it used to drive people on the right batty. It still does. If I say something nice about President Obama being a family man or loving his wife or being a good father to his daughters or being married only to one woman, people just lose their minds. But it's not for you to lose your mind, just like it's not for you to lose your mind in trying to speculate on whether or not Donald Trump is a Christian. It's actually not our job to judge whether or not a person is a Christian. Sure, we're supposed to judge people by their fruit. We're supposed to look at that fruit, and we're supposed to make, analysis there and govern ourselves accordingly. But to simply make a blanket statement about him not being a Christian, look how angry people get when pro-life people question the Christianity of individuals who believe in and promote abortion. People get mad. I mean, they get hopping mad. They get on their keyboard and their fingers are moving at the speed of light and they're emailing and they're calling you everything but a child of God. They're rebuking you, casting out demons via email, quoting scripture, not the scriptures where God formed you and knew you before he knitted you together in your mother's womb, but the other scriptures, any scripture they can find that can basically say you're wrong for even questioning that. So how can you question the Christianity of Donald Trump? Obviously, he's had some mistakes, but how can you question the current Christianity of the president? So, people are going to make their own decisions on that. But I want to give you the new executive order aiming to protect religious liberty from government overreach. This new initiative was signed in executive order today on the National Day of Prayer to ensure that the faith-based and community organizations that form the bedrock of our society have strong advocates in the White House and throughout the federal government. Trump plans to sign the order in a Rose Garden ceremony. He had some 200 representatives of religious groups there, which is fantastic. And so I want to do this prayer. It's called Insight into Wisdom in the Trust Prayers, which you can find out more about in Growing in Prayer by Dr. Mike Bickle. Father, give me wisdom on how to live before you, that I may walk in intimacy, which is union with you. Give me insight into your word, your will, and your ways. Teach me how to follow your Spirit's leadership in every area of my life, including my finances, my schedule, my emotions, my circumstances, fears and addictions, my physical body, my relationship, and my future. Give me new creative ideas in every area of my life. Father, I long to walk in the fullness of your will in every area of my life. That's hour one. We'll be back with hour two of Stacy on the right after this.
Urban Family Talk.
Secular progressives in the United States have worked to alter the very nature of our republic.
For the progressives, there are no longer any God-given natural rights.
AFA Executive Vice President Ed Vitagliano helps you understand the progressive threat to the American Republic. Get your copy of this powerful DVD from the AFA Cultural Institute at afastore.net.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Connecticut police are investigating human remains found at one of the structures impacted by an explosion in a barn. Police say the incident was intentional and set by the homeowner. North Haven Police Deputy Chief Jonathan Mulhern says that 9 injured officers came from multiple communities.
The 9 officers that were injured, all of them are still hospitalized at this point in time. The team that was handling this incident is the South Central Regional SWAT team. It is made up of 6 communities. We have 5 East Haven officers that are currently still hospitalized. We have 3 North Haven officers that are currently hospitalized, and an officer from Brantford. They all did suffer injuries that were consistent with the blast or an explosion.
The suspect is believed to have initiated the explosion when police tried to negotiate for him to exit the house. President Trump's new attorney, Rudy Giuliani, says attorney Michael Cohen acted alone in paying off adult film star Stormy Daniels to stay quiet about an alleged affair with the president.
She was alleging, although there's the contrary letter that she signed, that it never happened, that there was a one-time affair. And I think when Cohen heard $130,000, he said, "My God, this is cheap. They come cheap. Let me get the thing signed up and signed off."
Giuliani says Cohen has been repaid the $130,000 for, quote, expenses. Giuliani also said no campaign finance laws were broken when Daniels was paid. Prisoners in a North Korean labor camp could soon be released. Simon Owen has more.
The president's comments follow news reports in South Korea suggesting 3 Americans being held at a North Korean labor camp have been moved to a hotel on the outskirts of the capital, Pyongyang, prompting speculation they may soon be freed. The State Department says it can't confirm the reports. Kim Dong-chul is a pastor who was arrested 3 years ago. Tony Kim and Kim Hak-song were working at a North Korean university when they were detained last year. Simon Owen, Fox News.
We're seeing new levels of censorship on social media and renewed attacks on families and communities. Chris Woodward reports Christian adoption is no exception.
Jamison Taylor of the Mississippi Center for Public Policy says the left is trying to prevent Christian adoptions in 2 ways.
First, you're seeing states like Illinois and Massachusetts are discriminating against faith-based adoption agencies, literally putting them out of business. Second, you have holdovers from the Obama administration at the Department of State are working to shut down international adoption. They see international adoption as a form of neo-colonial racism. And these bureaucrats are reducing the number of accredited adoption agencies. They're putting pressure on small Christian providers, and they're making it very difficult and very expensive for families to adopt internationally. So we saw in 2017 there were only 5,000 international adoptions by U.S. parents. And this is at a time when the number of orphan children worldwide is increasing.
It is for these and other reasons that Taylor thinks Christians have to defend their civil liberties.
Call your lawmakers. Ask them to protect religious adoption agencies from discrimination. Call the White House. Encourage President Trump and his newly appointed Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, to save international adoption and to appoint new leadership at the Office of Children's Services in the State Department.
I'm Chris Woodward.
And finally, an armored truck makes it rain money in Indianapolis.
Cruising across I-70, the back door of a Brinks truck flew open. The driver didn't notice right away, so
bags of money were falling out of the back onto the interstate.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars blowing across the highway, people pulling over to help themselves, including a school bus driver. But Corporal Brock McCooey of the Indiana State Police says that's theft, and they're urging people to hand in any cash they may have grabbed.
There's amnesty. There's no real questions asked if you're willing to give it back.
For those who don't, police say they have tips and license numbers. Jack Callahan, Fox News.
For American Family News, I'm Russ DPU.
Coming next week on The Dwelling Place. Pastor Al Pittman continues to walk us through the Bible, line by line and verse by verse, to let God show us just how timeless His truth is. That's next week on The Dwelling Place.
Welcome to Stacy on the Right with your host, Stacy Washington.
Let me give the scorecard for the audience. Thus far, under President Trump, 15 appeals court judges have been confirmed. An additional 12 have been nominated, and 3 are almost nominated. 17 district court judges have been confirmed. 58 are nominated. 5 more are pending. Now, compare that with overall Bill Clinton in 2 terms, 62 appeals court judges. W had 61. President Obama had 49. But President Trump already has 15 with 6 more in the hopper. And indeed, in W's first 2 years, he only had 17 confirmations, one of which was a Democrat, by the way. Didn't get another one until March of 2003. How many do you expect on the federal appeals court to get confirmed by your break for the elections, Leader McConnell?
Well, we're going to continue to confirm judges all year. You know, the Congress doesn't stop with the elections. It goes until the end of the year. We're going to do 6 more next week, which will bring us to 21. I'm processing them as quickly as they come out of the Judiciary Committee, and the administration is sending them up rapidly. I don't know what the final number is, but my goal, Hugh, is to confirm all the circuit and district court judges that come out of committee this calendar year.
So he's talking about going as fast as they possibly can, and I'm hoping that they actually are able to accomplish that. He talks about making a lasting contribution to the country by appointing and confirming these strict constructionists to the court. They're in their late 40s and early 50s, which means they have, quite a bit of time governing on the bench, hopefully. And with longer life expectancies, that's what they'll be doing. Judges tend not to obviously retire when they're 65. They go on and they work up until the point where they can't work anymore. And so we're excited about that. We want that to be the case for these judges. I think when he talks about making a generational change, I sincerely hope that that's the truth. Strict constructionist interpretation of the Constitution it's integral to us maintaining what we have here. And I understand that when I talk about the blueprint, a better deal for Black America, we're talking about some reforms to government, but included in all of the things that I try to advocate for or I'm working on, whether it's the Project 21 blueprint or what we do here on this show or talking about different policies and how they interact and intersect with Americans in their everyday lives, it's the idea that we have something great. And while I often will say that Washington is broken, that's due to the people. I don't believe it's because we have the incorrect system of government. And so, I'll have people reach out to me and say, what about conservatism attracts you? Why would you as a Black person be interested in a more traditional viewpoint? Well, that's the way I was raised. My parents are Democrats, but they married each other. They were actually high school sweethearts. My dad went to the Vietnam War, and then when he got back, my mom had already gone off to college, and she wasn't in the little hometown where they came from. So he came back from the military, and he was on leave from an extended tour in Vietnam. He comes back to the town where she's currently living, so not their hometown, another town, but still, kind of in the middle of the country. And he joins her there, and within weeks of arriving, he's asked her to marry him. And shortly thereafter, he went back onto active duty, and he was planning on separating. And my mom was adamant that they wouldn't go back to the small town that they came from because there wasn't much opportunity there. Just a couple of factories and then retail work. And without educations, what exactly would they do? They couldn't teach. They'd have to work at the factory. And that was something she vowed she would never do. And so they got married. And then I came along really fast after that. And then instead of leaving the service, they stayed in because my mom believed that they would be more well-rounded people and that their lives would be more interesting if they stayed in the military and took advantage of the fact that he would have to move every 3 years. So they'd see the country and hopefully see the world, which is exactly what they did. And so, of course, I have a sister. And during the course of all that, my mom went back and finished her education. And my dad was a military policeman, and he's still in law enforcement. And it was a very traditional upbringing. I mean, we're talking about corporal punishment here. We're talking about not being disrespectful. We're talking about consequences. I got an allowance, but it wasn't for free. I didn't get the allowance just because I lived there. I had to actually do chores, and they had to be done to a certain standard in order for me to get my allowance, or I would get docked. And I was responsible for taking care of some things that didn't have anything to do with my allowance because I lived there. And it was over and over again during my childhood. Whenever I would get a hold to some idea about someone owing me something, my dad would always say, nobody owes you anything. And one of their favorite sayings, if you're listening in the audience and you have parents from that era, my dad would say it all the time. He'd say, the only thing I'd say, you have to do this, you have to let me do this, or you have to give me this. And he'd say, the only thing I got to do is stay black and pay my taxes. That's what he would say. My mom would say it too. And that was their way of saying, no one has to do anything. So if you want to earn something, earn it. And so every summer, starting when I was 13, I worked all summer long. And of course, in Germany, there weren't as many summer camps and things like nowadays. My kids go to all these, fancy little excursions and learning opportunities and sports camps. And that stuff just did not exist in Germany back when I was growing up. They're just, maybe it didn't, my parents just didn't send us. I don't know, but they weren't flying us back to the U.S. to do camps. So we stayed there. And I'd been babysitting since I was 11 years old. I first obviously babysat my younger sister, but then I would babysit other kids. With their parents would say, can you come over for a couple hours and watch? And I would earn money that way. And so it was always with my parents, while they were Democrats, they were very traditional, what you call blue dog Democrats, from Democrats from old. And it was always a stressing that I had to work and make my own way. I had to be responsible for myself. If I made a mistake, I had to own up for it. And these were the kinds of things that it was just taken for granted. And I didn't know any parents that believed differently. I didn't know any parents that felt like, oh, well, we should just give you whatever you want. You don't have to work. You don't have to earn your allowance. You don't have to participate in chores. You don't have to do any of that stuff. I didn't know any parents like that. And obviously you have a much more homogenized group when you're talking about military families. Military families are very hardworking and have a lot of things in common. It's a very tight-knit kind of a community, but it's still very reflective of other groups in the United States during that time. And so, that's why I believe in conservative ideals. And I see the Democrats moving further and further away from that. And it's in the party platforms of the two political parties. And so I see the mistakes that the Republicans have made, and probably, the people are involved, so there will be mistakes. But I also see that foundationally, there's a material difference between the two. And so it's just, it just is what it is. It's like you can change some things. And what I wish for sometimes when I see the resistance of, especially in the Black community, of even giving Republicans a chance, and the resistance that the Republicans demonstrate in not really campaigning in Black neighborhoods and campaigning in areas where Blacks could actually buy into what we believe in. When I see that, sometimes I just wish that the Democrats like my parents who believe in that more traditional ethos, that instead of saying, well, Barack Obama said abortion's okay, so I guess we got to give that up. Barack Obama evolved on gay marriage. We got to go ahead and evolve. Instead of saying that they would dig their heels in and say, no, I'm not giving up on being a traditional Democrat. I'm going to bring the party back with me. If that were to happen, and believe me, I want to win elections, but I want to win people more. I want more people to be able to take advantage of what is, it's opportunity. It's opportunity. And so I wish that that's what would happen. In the absence of major movement of the Black community towards the traditional Republican Party or Republican ideals, it'd be great if people who are Christians and are Democrats would say, I'm not going to put up with these pro-abortion candidates anymore. I'm a Democrat and I want a pro-life Democrat in office. Or I'm a Democrat, but I believe in educational choice. These schools are failing our kids. I want some choice for kids. I want to be a Democrat who's for choice. What's wrong with that? Democrats who own guns. I don't believe that every gun owner is a potential mass shooter. I own guns. I've never shot anyone. This is the case for every Democrat you see that is a lawful gun owner. 99.999% of them have never, ever committed a crime or had any issue at all with guns. So why wouldn't they say, I'm not going to agree with the Democrats doing this? It's in what we will accept. Just like we Republicans accept the Republicans over and over again saying they're going to defund Planned Parenthood and never doing it, Democrats are accepting that the Democrats say they're going to do things for inner city America, or they're going to do things for this community or that community, and they're not doing it. So the change could come on any side. We have a caller. Let's go to Norman in Mississippi. Thank you for calling the show today.
Hello.
Hello. How you doing?
I'm good, Stacy. I just want to comment if you don't mind.
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, what I was going to say is I think a lot of people don't really realize just how conservative blacks were in America up until really a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
When I was growing up, I'm 71. When I was growing up, most black people that I knew were Republicans. And they were Republicans for a reason. The Republican Party offered better opportunity at that time. And so I'm of the mind that black folk are just like everybody else. They vote for what's in their best interest. And so, or at least what they think are in their best interest. And what Republican Party did, when Ronald Reagan came in, that's when most of them left the Republican Party, because he cut a deal with white Southern Democrats that really brought a wedge between blacks and whites in the Republican Party. And so most black people who I know that's over, say, 50 years old are still very conservative people. In the neighborhood that I grew up in, I didn't know any liberal. And I grew up in an all-black neighborhood. I didn't know any liberal. I knew people who believed the Bible, who tried to live like a neighbor, who knew how to treat each other. My family, you rarely saw a divorce throughout the neighborhood. So I think what has happened is not just Democrat morals, Republican morals are going away. I will grant you that Democrats headed down the hill first, but Republicans are trying to catch them. Right now, you can't hardly find a Republican who's willing to come on the air and condemn the act of homosexuality. They will not do it. And of course, Democrats have bought into the whole thing, but Republicans won't do it. Republicans don't talk about abortion until election time. And I think one of the reasons why you don't see a lot of black Republicans, because the Republican Party have not made any effort to go into the community and to go after black vote. They just wrote them off. But blacks used to be a serious constituency of the Republican Party, and so they left for a reason, and they will go back. So that's just a fact.
Okay. Well, I agree with some of what you said, and some of what you said kind of echoes my comments from a few moments ago about not enough effort being made to attract black voters. And I differ with you on the fact that Republicans don't talk about abortion. I have people regularly reach out to me and say I talk about it too much here on this program. I know most of the hosts on this network, if not all, talk about the scourge of abortion for the black community. And it's not just Urban Family Talk. We talk about it. I hear other hosts talking about it. You're right that a lot of Republicans have kind of given up on talking about homosexuality because we now have the Obergefell decision, which says, that gays can marry. But there are plenty of traditionally minded Republicans who believe in heterosexual traditional view of marriage. I do appreciate you calling, and what we have to do is we have to line all this stuff up with the Word of God and figure out what God says and then do that. And we'd be in a much better place, all of us, regardless of politics, if we took that action first. I appreciate you calling and listening to the show, Norman. Thank you so much. Have a blessed evening. And that's the music. We're going to be back with our next guest right after these messages. Stay there.
Trust can be defined as the assured reliance on the character of another, a fiduciary relationship wherein funds are held under specific conditions, or an American family coffee with a hint of blueberry cobbler, announcing the return of one of our favorites. Trust is a medium roast Brazilian coffee with notes of sweet blueberries, vanilla, and spices, and your purchase helps support the American Family Association. Trust, available for a limited time from afastore.net.
Come to 1milliondads.com. Be strengthened as a Christian leader for your wife and children, your church, your community. We believe that missing fathers is what's wrong with this country. No longer should men be weak or ineffective. 1milliondads.com is where we can learn and grow together as men of the cross. 1milliondads.com. Lead or others will.
This is Mason Weaver, bringing you the truth right between their lies.
Greetings, folks. This is ClarenceAMason.com with the truth between the lies. Folks, I think that sometimes we need to have a spiritual reckoning. We need to be able to look and think about who we are and why we are here and our purpose in this life. We need to stop trying to make others comfortable in their sins. We want to appease them. It's okay. We no longer want to talk about consequences for your sinful activities. Eventually it's going to end. Eventually, the decisions we make will come before judgment. Eventually, the people you see committing sins against God will stand before God and be accountable for those sins. Eternity is a long time to be wrong. And it's time we stop trying to not embarrass folks and offend folks because we're telling folks the truth. It is time to tell them the truth. Now, I wonder sometimes, why are we so concerned? Don't you realize that every knee shall bow to Jesus? Every knee, great and small, rich and poor, black and white, every knee shall bow to Jesus. Even the offended, even the unbelievers, even folks who ridicule, even people who attacked and killed and murdered Christians will one day bow their knee before the presence of Christ. So who are we to make them feel comfortable where they are? It doesn't matter. That bowing of your knee will not be voluntary. It will be in response to what you see. This is C.A. Mason with the truth between the lies.
You have been listening to Mason Weaver. Our email address is clarenceamason@clarenceamason.com. Welcome back to Stacy on the Right.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. Yeah, we're back. UrbanFamilyTalk.com. American Family Radio, you can find out more at afr.net. There's so much good stuff over there. And also on Urban, we have just all the good stuff for you. I want to encourage you to go to our Facebook page, Stacy on the Right Show, and hit the like button. Also click get notifications. That way you'll see when we post things. And I don't post a ton over there anymore because it was just something that was dominating all of my time, but I do post there regularly. So every day, and really great articles that you can read. With the algorithm being what it is on Facebook, a news story, so a story that I post about cybersecurity or foreign policy or anything, that news story is not going to be placed in your feed because it is a news story. Now, videos get a little bit more traction, but for the most part, they've capped interaction with the people on the page to about 4 to 5%. So that means that if you are one of the 74,000 people who like the page and you want to get notifications, you actually have to select get notifications to get it, because if you don't, they're only allowing about 4 to 5% of that 74,000 to see what I'm putting out on the page. Now, that doesn't really make much sense, does it? Because if you like something on Facebook, that's supposed to equate to I want to see it. But they've decided otherwise. So just select get notifications, and we'll do our best to continue to have good stuff up there for you. I'm having some difficulty with my my settings, And so that's why I don't have, we're actually going to be adding on the live stream for the Hamilton Corner onto the Stacy on the Right Show page to give more access for people who want to see that live stream. And they already like my page. They'll see it instead of having to transmutate over to another page to find it. And so that'll be fun. And then I'll be adding others as I find things that are good to stream onto the page. To kind of bow down to their latest obsession, which is video over at the Facebook. And then, of course, at Periscope, please hit the hearts, send us the hearts, and also share the show on your Twitter feed. If you like what we're putting out here, we'd love to have you share the show. I'm doing a lot of radio and media for the Blueprint, and so I was able to go onto the Chad Benson show and some others. And so just, you're likely to hear me if you turn on your radio talking about it. And there's so much to share, so much great information to share about the Blueprint. In fact, go ahead and I have it here. I'll go ahead and pull up some of it for you to talk about. So we've got these 10 policy areas for the Blueprint. And what that's about, the policy areas, the whole idea behind the Blueprint is that it's a better deal for Black America. Now, better meaning, obviously there are certain things that are going on that you can take part in as an American when you're no matter what part of the society you're working in, whether you've got low income, moderate income, etc. But what we're doing at Project 21, and this is what the Blueprint looks like, and it has not been released yet. Our executive summary has been released, but the entirety of it has not been released yet. And there are 10 areas of focus with key recommendations, and we have 57 recommendations that we've come up with. And this could have been a book. I'm just going to be real with you. This could have been a book. But instead of putting out a book that only the most ardent policy wonks would take the time to read, we decided to put it together in something that you can take this, fold it up and put it in your purse. You can put it in your briefcase, your backpack. You can sandwich it in between your laptop, close your laptop, stick it in the bag, and you can choose to read it anywhere. We also have the PDF version, obviously, and we're going to release the entire thing, but we've chosen to release each key policy area, one per week, and we're starting shortly. But the executive summary, I want to give you the 10 key policy areas that we're talking about. So you've got promoting K through 12 educational choice. We talk about vouchers in there, need-based vouchers funded through a voluntary donation checkbox on the IRS 1040 form. So instead of saying we need to increase taxes to fund vouchers, no, we can partially fund these educational choice vouchers through people simply saying, I want to give, $100. I want to give $1,000. I want to give my whole refund, whatever. People are really generous when they're asked, instead of saying everyone has to pay an additional 10%. No, who'd like to donate? Awesome. We want to improve school security through upgrades and entry doors, and by making it just a matter of course that anyone who wants to be trained and is school personnel can become trained and carry a firearm at school concealed. This is how you put this thing down. Obviously, we need help in the mental health areas, but that's not a part of promoting K through 12 educational choice. The next policy area is improving higher education. So for that one, again, this is the good stuff. You want to require schools to meet the minimum graduation rate standards for both general and minority student populations to be eligible for federal student financial aid. You want to establish tuition caps for schools participating in student financial aid programs. And this is where the rubber meets the road. So instead of just being able to take the federal aid willy-nilly and not really follow students and not really make it clear to them that this federal aid is tied to you graduating, you've got to graduate. You've got to stay on course. We need to help you stay on course. We need you to show up to these tutoring sessions. We need you to take advantage of the group study sessions that are held in your dorm. Instead of just turning people loose on college campuses to borrow all the money they want and to access all the federally based student aid that they want, they have to actually tie that to performance. The next policy area is reducing Black unemployment, abolishing the Jim Crow era Davis-Bacon Act, initiating a second wave of welfare reform with work requirements, and waiving the minimum wage and collection of FICA for younger workers in special low-income areas. This is, again, this is basically saying we're not going to let illegal immigrants take your jobs in your communities, in your neighborhoods, by saying, look, I don't have to work for minimum wage. You can hire me because you don't have to worry about me working for minimum wage. I'm off the books. Instead of them looking for off the books employees, they'll be looking for employees who are willing to negotiate on the wage. Now, people get angry when I say this, abolish the minimum wage, get rid of the Davis-Bacon Act. Well, before the implementation of those programs, blacks had a lower unemployment rate than whites, especially black teens. Now, you're probably thinking, well, I can't find anybody to work for $7.50 an hour. Well, yeah, if people have high school education and are eminently employable, they probably don't want to work for $7.50 an hour. But we're talking about people who, if you're not in the job market at all, and the choice is no job or $5 an hour, and you know, okay, I'm going to work for $5 an hour. I'm going to get some work history. I'm going to get some training. I'm going to take advantage of this, and I'll only be working for this amount while you're living. Because these are not head of households. We're not talking about people supporting a family of 4 on this. We're talking about teenagers and people who want to get into the workforce. You get into the workforce, you take advantage of the opportunity, and within 12 months, now you're okay. Thank you so much for the opportunity, but I'm going to work over here, or I'm going to school. I'm going to take training, whatever. We have to get the government out of the way. The next policy area is strengthening faith-based communities by establishing a federal tax credit scholarship, repealing the Johnson Amendment, and creating a tax credit for families who are paying for nursery through grade 12 fees and tuition, banning abortions that are based exclusively on the ethnic background of the fetus. So you will no longer be able to call up Planned Parenthood and say, I want to donate money to abort a black baby, or I want to abort this baby because its father is black. That won't be a thing anymore. And when you talk about racism, doesn't that strike at the heart of racism by saying that's not going to be the law of the land here? You can't just go around doing abortions based on the race of the baby, the ethnic background of the baby. And then we have promoting self-determination, ending fraudulent election practices that dilute the black vote, requiring proof of citizenship to register, vigorously prosecuting those who target minority communities for fraud, and prohibit the mailing out of ballots that haven't been requested. What harms communities more than people who aren't citizens coming in and voting for things that people in that community might not want? People who are here illegally have different priorities than citizens. Of course, they want jobs, they want safe neighborhoods, they want to make it, but there are things that they want that citizens don't want, and your vote shouldn't be diluted by them. If they're not citizens, they should not be able to vote. Improving the relationship between police and black communities. And this goes to the heart of what we've seen so many of these protests and so much of this activity around demonizing the police. We need to improve those relationships. And we want to get police out of the regulation business. All of this ticketing people for parking on the wrong side of the street on a Tuesday, ticketing people for their garage being painted the wrong color. We got to stop that. We want to increase the use of body cameras, provide training to police in identifying people with autism, end gun bans, and put police in charge of safety training. We want to end excessive regulations by requiring minority impact assessments for new regulations. So in addition to President Trump's mandate of eliminating 2 to 22 regulations for every one that's implemented, you would also have minority impact statements. In other words, this regulation would harm this group of people. You have to look at all of the impacts before you're able to pass the regulation. These are our ideas, and I'm still feeling like, that's genius. Stopping the wealth transfer from the poor to non-citizens, barring illegal aliens from using public services except in emergencies, stopping wealth transfer from the poor to non-citizens. Sorry, I repeated myself. Reducing the economic harm of excise taxes, repealing federal, state, and local sin and gas taxes, all of which have disproportionate negative impacts on low-income families. We're talking about families that have $800 in fees for, taxes for something small. Again, I go back to they paint the garage is in disrepair. There's one area of the garage that they repair. They go back in and they paint it to cover up the repair of plywood or backer board or whatever. They don't paint it the exact matching color of the rest of the structure, or they painted a color that's not allowed. They paint that whole panel and they painted a color that's so-called not allowed or not on the approved list, and they start getting fined day by day by day. I'm not making these things up. This is the kind of stuff that gets people later, once the fine reaches over $1,200. Now it's a felony amount, and they get pulled over for, slow stopping a stop sign. The warrant is there. They get arrested and held in prison for 6 weeks. This has happened to people who live in some communities here in St. Louis. You're held in jail for 6 weeks. Now you've lost your job. You're held in jail for 6 weeks. You haven't gotten a paycheck in 3 fortnights. Now you're looking at some serious problems all over something silly, something that was a law or rule made up by some bureaucrat in order to extract more money from the people who live in that community. We have to be against that. And I hope you're hearing my heart here. This is not about demonizing people. This is not about making people feel bad for their situations. It's about saying, when you sit and you look at what people are going through because of these rules and regulations, it is obvious that we need fewer of them. People need to be more free. So if that means some neighborhoods have garages that are painted a color that some bureaucrat doesn't like, okay. The bureaucrat just can look across the street when they drive by that house. They don't have to look at the house with the garage that's painted the color that they don't like. That is a kind of tertiary quality of life issue for someone who doesn't like looking at a certain color. Having that person, that homeowner, be able to repair their garage and bring the garage up to code and then go on working and taking care of themselves is far more important. Far more important. And then the last one is reforming the criminal justice system. Require convictions for assets to be forfeited. In other words, they can't come and confiscate your car based on an arrest warrant. So in order for them to confiscate something that they feel was ill-gotten gains due to criminal activity, you must first be convicted. There's a huge difference here. This is a game changer. Again, if you've been accused, they shouldn't be allowed to confiscate what you have and take it, whether it's money that you have in your car or something you have on your persons. We're not talking about drugs. We're not talking about contraband. We're talking about your lawfully owned property being confiscated before you're convicted. That's not the American way. If we have the presumption of innocence, then your property should remain your property until you are actually convicted. Then once you're convicted, if as a part of your sentencing that property must be forfeited, then that makes more sense. Prohibit incarceration for fine-only misdemeanors. So here we are again. Your taillight's busted. That's a fine. If you don't pay the fine in a timely manner, they can't arrest you and put you in jail for it. Now, this kind of stuff, if you're middle class, if you're upper class, you're listening to me talk about this, you're like, just pay the fine. For people who are poverty-stricken, a fine of $75 for a broken taillight can mean the difference between keeping their lights on and maybe feeding kids or something that is they absolutely must do, paying a utility bill. Now, should they get their taillight fixed? Absolutely. Should they go to jail if they can't afford to get the taillight fixed? No, absolutely not. So, requiring that fines and forfeitures be transferred to general funds instead of enforcing agency budgets. Considering the ability of those who've been fined, considering their ability to pay. So before the judge says, I'm fining you $1,200, you have to consider whether or not the person can afford to pay it. If the punishment for the crime is a fine of $1,200, but the person who's standing before you is indigent, why would you fine them that? You know they can't pay it. You're basically saying go to jail. This is all common sense stuff, but it's not common sense because these things are happening to real people, and we care about that. And that's why we actually took these recommendations to the White House, and we took them to Leader McConnell's office, and we laid them right there in front of them. We explained them, and we asked for their help in implementing these recommendations. And we got invited back. We're going back to the White House to make some of these things happen. So please keep us lifted in prayer that we would be able to do some of these things, that we'd be able to do many of them. And we'll be back with more right after this.
This is Uncommon Moments with Super Bowl winning coach Tony Dungy and his wife Lauren on their uncommon marriage adventure. Available now in paperback.
You need to set aside some time to talk. If you don't commit to talking together and making time for the heart-to-heart communication, it's not going to happen. I can tell you that. And I'm talking about setting aside time to talk on a regular basis. And this isn't the time to change things radically in your life or with your husband, but you really need to share your heart with your spouse and share your highs and lows and just have some good dialogue, good conversation without the kids being around.
The Uncommon Marriage Adventure by Tony and Lauren Dungy. Now available in softcover from Tyndale Momentum. More info at CoachDungy.com. That's CoachDungy.com.
Family is an institution set forth by God, one man and one woman for life, with the outflow being children produced by that union. It's obvious to all that there is an attack on the family in our country, and especially on fathers. Whether it's the cycle of sin that persists in our families or the pressure from our government to exclude men from being intimately involved, the strategic battle is on for the souls of men. Join us in the battle to strengthen fatherhood. UrbanFamilyTalk.com.
I'm Ron. Hanging around in crack houses, I witnessed the darkest side of drug life, and my addiction nearly got me killed. But here at Teen Challenge, they showed me how to live drug-free.
If you know an adult or teenager who's struggling with a chemical addiction, Teen Challenge can help. Call us today at 417-581-2181 or reach us online at teenchallengeusa.com. This is Urban Family Talk.
You never know what the future might be. That's the beauty of possibility. Every human life, so irreplaceable. I can't imagine life without you. It's just unthinkable. There's no one like you, no one like you. You're 1 in 7 billion. There's no one like you, no one like you. You're 1 in 7 billion.
We are all created by God with undeniable purpose. Learn more about beautiful possibility at www.radiance.life. Follow us on Twitter at Life Has Purpose.
This is Stacy on the Right on Urban Family Talk.
When it comes to NAFTA, the most frequent concern I hear from Texas farmers, Texas ranchers, Texas business owners is what's going to happen with trade, and NAFTA in particular. Texas has done very, very well under NAFTA. Now, in my view, NAFTA renegotiation, it could be a good thing or it could be a bad thing. If NAFTA renegotiation is used to further expand our access to the markets in Mexico and Canada to enable our farmers and ranchers and manufacturers to sell more of our goods, more of our crops, more of our livestock, that's a good thing. If, on the other hand, it is used as a vehicle to erect barriers to the American market to shut down trade, that would be a bad thing. And so I have enthusiastically urged the president to use NAFTA renegotiation to expand trade, and specifically the idea that you're referencing is I joined with two other senators, Cory Gardner from Colorado and Steve Daines from Montana, and we urge the president to use NAFTA renegotiation as a vehicle for regulatory reform, to put into law, to codify lifting the regulatory burdens of Washington on small businesses and job creators, and in particular, to use that to enact what's called the REINS Act. The REINS Act is legislation I'm an original sponsor of that says any economic regulation that imposes $100 million or more of cost on the economy cannot go into effect without Congress voting up or down on it. It means you can't have unelected bureaucrats doing things like the Waters of the United States rule without ever any member of Congress having to vote on it.
Right.
If we enacted that, it would be the most meaningful regulatory reform, the most important relief from job-killing regulations we've ever enacted.
You gotta love Ted Cruz for he just goes in. He goes all the way in, and he knows what he's talking about. And so that's why we're trying to get him on the show. You guys have to tweet Ted Cruz and ask him if he'll join us here on the program. We've interviewed Senator Mike Lee and so many other great members of Congress, and we would love to talk to Ted Cruz about some of these fun ideas that he has. And when I say fun, I mean, it's only fun to people like me who are, I'm kind of policy wonkish. I enjoy hearing about different ways that we can use government to get itself out of the way, like having the government cannibalize itself. That's exciting. That's exciting to me. It just makes me think about the people who are currently suffering under different things that the government does. And it was always, we're doing this to help people. And then when people aren't helped, the people who actually implemented it, they're already gone. There's no accountability. It's not like if you do something or implement something with the government and it hurts people, they don't come back to you later and say, you need to pay this or you need to pay that. So I want to make a statement about the Bill Cosby conviction. And then I want to get into the Amazon. So, the Amazon HQ, we've covered it here on the show a few times. And they've now started issuing letters because there were hundreds of cities who actually put in bids to try to be the site of the next Amazon HQ. They've whittled it down to 20 cities. And Amazon has reportedly conducted around 200 phone calls to explain why people weren't chosen. So I want to talk about that. But first, I want to talk about Bill Cosby's conviction. So it's pretty clear to me that something was wrong, that he was engaged in something that was wrongdoing. And I didn't want to believe it before because Bill Cosby, he's not just America's dad. He played a huge role for, like, if you grew up middle class like I did with your mom and dad, watching The Cosby Show was one of the few times that you could look on television and see Black people represented in not just a somewhat good light or a comedic light. There's plenty of Black shows, 70s on forward that have had Blacks. It's focused on a Black family. But usually there's so much comedy and there's so much, it's like a woven in kind of dysfunction that just wasn't present on the Cosbys. And when I say it had an impact, it really changed the way white people viewed professional Black families, the way that Black people viewed professional Black families, and the way professional Black families viewed themselves. And I'm saying, families where the parents are college educated and they're working in professions, that type of thing. And so I know it doesn't seem like it's such a big deal if you're not Black or if you're not someone who really watched the Cosbys, you really it's like something that went on that was a groundswell, but it just didn't seem like it was that impactful. But it really was. And so I know now that he's been convicted, a lot of places are like, well, we're taking back our honorary degree. We're going to take back your award that we gave to you. And the question that I have is, well, are these colleges that gave him honorary degrees, are they also going to give back the money that he gave to them? Because while he was extraordinarily, his behavior was reprehensible and without defense towards these women, he also did some amazing things. Like, there are people walking around today who have college educations who wouldn't have had, because without Bill Cosby's scholarship programs and the programs that he funded and buildings at Black colleges that he actually built with some of the money that he made because he became wealthy as a television star, and the endorsements that he did, does everyone who got a degree through a scholarship from him pay the money back? Do the colleges pay the money back for the buildings and the different things the programs that they ran? Do the arts and sciences that he donated money to fund art programs and do they all give the money back since they're taking back their awards? I don't think they will. And so I'm not saying they should, but I am saying that we can't invalidate The Cosby Show in its entirety because of the actions that he took, because while he was doing those bad things, he was also doing a lot of really great things. And it might be the guilt from what he was doing to women. He was, doing all the donations, or he did the donations and funded the scholarships because he wanted to feel better about himself, or he was guilty, or maybe he did it for the right reasons. At this point, it really doesn't matter. The other thing about completely obliterating his body of work is that you're saying that everyone else who worked on the Cosby Show, their work didn't matter either. And I'm serious now. Are you saying that Felicia Rashad, who was the mom on the Cosby Show, that all of those years she spent playing the mom now have to be invalidated and are irrelevant because of Bill Cosby? How's that fair to her? How's that fair to Raven Simone, who that's how we even know who she is? And the last thing that I would say is, if we're doing that for Bill Cosby, if we're taking away all of his awards and erasing him from history, then it looks like if we're going to do that for everybody who participated in something bad, that we're going to be erasing a lot of history, because lots of people in Hollywood were sexual aggressors. Lots of the men in Hollywood over the decades, we've seen it. The Me Too movement has exposed all of these different men who did things to women, horrible things. In fact, the latest story out isn't even out of Hollywood. Apparently, one of the NFL teams took their cheerleading squad down to Costa Rica and made the women go on dates with men down there topless. They made these cheerleaders, who are employees of their organization, basically they made them act like sex slaves. So that's wrong. But wrong behavior doesn't obliterate the fact that the Cosby Show is a great contribution to American entertainment. And I don't want to see that part go, especially when you look around television now and you see what passes for entertainment. When you see what people are actually, what we're being offered to consume in the realm of entertainment, it really depresses you. Norman called a couple of segments ago and he was talking about how much things have changed. And he castigated the Democrats just a little bit and the Republicans a little bit. And he was, talking about when he was a child and he's in his 70s, how it was so different. And when both sets of my grandparents have passed away, but I remember when I was younger, at 13 years old, we would travel back to the United States and I would get in my grandma's bed with her and we would they loved watching those old Westerns because they froze their television viewing. And, with cable, you can watch nothing but old Westerns. And so, they were retired and they would watch that. My granddad would watch it. My grandma really she liked to read. And I would get in the bed with her and we'd talk and she'd ask me to tell her all about, my school year and things like that. Because living in Germany, I couldn't call them all the time. That was just too expensive. And so we would write them letters, but she would ask me to tell me something interesting about school this year. Tell me something that you learned, something that you did. So I would tell her, whatever. And she would say, that sure is different back when I was a girl. And then she'd start telling me what it was like for her. And it was obviously a different time. We have just these few opportunities to have something good in our, we have 100% of the opportunities we have for things to be good and to have good, clean, wholesome entertainment. But so few of those opportunities are actually taken and something good, clean, and wholesome is created. The Cosby Show wasn't perfect, but it was one of, in my opinions, the shining examples of good, wholesome entertainment that we've had during my lifetime of being an avid television watcher. And I just refuse to allow it to go away and be completely obliterated because of the horrible actions of Bill Cosby. If for nothing else, that there are so many other people who worked on the Cosby Show who did nothing wrong and their work stands. And I would even say, I encourage people in Hollywood to look at the Cosby Show and to think about what that family represented to so many millions of Americans and strive to create content like that again. It's not too late. It's never too late to say, we need a reboot. We need to stop here, reevaluate, and come back with something better, something that all Americans can identify with, something that isn't about social justice, that doesn't have any political overtones, that's just about families dealing with the things that families deal with. Because if you suck the politics out of the equation, families are still dealing with death, births, marriages, divorces, health issues, job issues, interpersonal relationships. Just those topics there are enough to have a fully viable television show about families. And why can't we have that? So I'm not one of those people who believes that everything that he worked for should be stripped away because he's now been convicted. And I know it's encouraging in some ways, if you think about it, that he's not been able to get away with this. He got away with it for decades, but now he's being held to account for what he did. And, that's the truth of the matter. But it doesn't take away the DVD box set of The Cosby Show, which is great watching. It's great family material. And if you're looking for something to watch with your family where you don't have to fast forward through sex and violence and all of that stuff, it's there and it's available. And I would encourage you to take a look at it in spite of what he did. So that's what I have to say about Bill Cosby. I found this article about Amazon feeling so bad about rejecting cities comical, not because it's characterized as almost like Amazon as a person, but because they're actually saying to these various places around the country, they're telling them why they weren't chosen. And some of them have gone to extraordinary efforts to try to get chosen. Like one place in Georgia actually offered Amazon the right to purchase land and declare that land for municipal accounting purposes its own town with Jeff Bezos as the mayor, so they could set their own tax rates and their own utilities and everything else, to give them complete command and control over the place where the campus would be located as a way of drawing them in. It's a little town in Georgia that offered them that, Stonecrest, Georgia. They were going to sector the land off and allow Amazon to create their own city, appoint Jeff Bezos as their unelected mayor. They also worked really hard to get Atlanta chosen as the source of the site of their HQ too. Amazon started off reviewing 238 proposals, and this is from across the U.S. and Canada and even Mexico. They were submitting offers. They've since whittled down the search to 20 cities, and if the tech conglomerate maintains their current candor and demeanor, they will also likely offer those yet to be turned down reasons for why they're not going to be the one. And I want to reiterate my call for anybody who works in this audience, who listens in this audience, who has contacts at Amazon, to get Jeff Bezos to at least consider choosing a rural area that is a small city of 100,000 or so and putting the HQ to there. The influx of another 55,000 people who are employees plus their families would create a new metropolitan area and the possibility of a new airport. And then we would have yet another major metropolitan area to add to the tally of what we have in the United States. And it would give an opportunity for people to try out some of their ideas for planning and for creating different environments for people to live in. I think it's a fantastic idea. Anyway, God bless you. Have a great night tonight. And don't forget, today's National Day of Prayer. Lift up our leadership all over the country. And we'll be back with you tomorrow. God bless.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of Urban Family Talk, Urban Family Communications, or American Family Association.
Urban Family Talk. Urban Family Talk.
In this 40th year celebration of the American Family Association, we invite you to help us remind America once again of the truth behind our national motto, "In God We Trust."